for patients or things that are beyond just unavailable, that are this FDA essential copy would not encompass necessarily, because there would be slight changes in dose or dosage form or any number of changes you can make. And so I think that being so restrictive on what the good actors are able to do is not a way to prevent the bad actors, because those workarounds are going to happen and exist, and the bad actors will take those avenues. And I think that as this has evolved from the New England Compounding Center tragedy and case, that focus has been only on the bad compounding out there and not necessarily on the immense patient access that compounding provides. And so I get a sense that I'm perceived as perhaps speaking not in favor of patient safety, which I don't think that I am not in favor of patient safety, because I think access is a huge part of that safety. And that this particular thing that we've been talking about is one of those ways that we're just further restricting what has already been restricted because of NECC and the actions taken thus far have reduced and limited compounding in many ways, good and bad. There's always the unintended consequences of the overarching restrictions, and I don't want this to be one of those. Thank you.
Member Doyle, any other comments on 0710 copies of the approved drug? Seeing or hearing none, then I'll ask the question for yes or no, and we'll go around the room. My question is, do you want to see this rule come back with changes as captured by staff member Davis? Or do you want to not see this rule come back to the next board meeting at all? And so a yes would, yes, I want to have this rule come back with changes, and a no means I don't want to see it come back at all. So board member Joyce.
Board member Joyce, in regards to cleaning up the language, yes.
Member Patel.
Member Patel, so I don't want this section.
Member Hemmons.
No comment.
Member DeBarmore.
Member DeBarmore, in light of further conversation, I would be in favor of not having this language at all.
Member Hall.
Member Hall, I would say don't have this language.
Member Beeman.
Board member Beeman, I do not want this language.
Board member Doyle, my answer is yes. Board member Chen.
Remember Chin, in light of conversation, I am okay with not having the language at this time.
Thank you. I count up 4 no's, which is the predominance of the board. So it's expected that Rule 710 have 8 members with 1 who had no comment, and so 4 is the quote unquote majority.
There were 5 of us, I think, that said no. Patel, myself, DeBarmore, Hall, and Beeman.
Yes, thank you for that correction. It is 5, I miscounted. So yes, with 5, that is a majority. So Rule 710 won't show up in the next version of the draft presented to the next board meeting complement. Now move on to, rule 855-183-0730.
Staff member Davis, we're on line 1335 of mailing C3. So next up is another rule related to a FDA guidance document. The FDA's compounding animal drugs from bulk drug substances guidance for industry is the exact guidance document. This rule was originally drafted using NABP model rule language and was primarily addressed the compounding of veterinary products from bulk drug substances. After receiving feedback from the work group, agency staff reworked the rules to address the compounding of veterinary drugs for in-office use by a licensed veterinarian. Per section 503A of the FDFC Act that we went over the chart earlier, compounding must be based on the receipt of a valid prescription for an identified individual patient. It can occur after the receipt of the prescription or in limited quantities before the receipt of such a prescription. The FDA regulates the use of medications in food-producing animals. This means that the FDA has the authority to set rules and requirements for how and when these medications can be used. However, there are some exceptions to the FDA's jurisdiction. For example, the FDA does not regulate the use of medications in non-food producing animals, such as pets. This is similar to the exception for 503A compounding. Again, 503A compounding is your typical pharmacy compounding that is done by a state licensed compounding pharmacy. Medications that are compounded under 503A are not subject to the CGMP requirements that are required by when the drug is manufactured by a 503B pharmacy. This rule only applies to drugs per one. This rule only applies to drugs compounded by a drug outlet pharmacy intended for non-food producing animal use by licensed veterinarians. Per two, a drug outlet pharmacy may compound drugs intended for non-food producing animal use. Per A, based on a patient-specific prescription from a licensed veterinarian, for example, a prescription for my dog. Or per B, for in-office use, also known as office stock, by a licensed veterinarian, specifically for a single treatment episode not to exceed 120-hour supply. Without rules addressing in-office veterinarian use for non-food producing animals, the 503A compounding pharmacy would not be able to compound non-patient specific medications. Based on public comment received, there is a true need for this exception that permits a 503A pharmacy to compound limited quantities for in-office use. It is important to note that there are a few 503B outsourcing facilities in the country, none in Oregon, that provide a wide range of compounded medications for veterinary medicine and practitioners in Oregon. These facilities have a small list of compounded medications for veterinarians that does not fully meet the needs of our veterinarians. Additionally, there's a high cost for 503B outsourcing facilities, non-patient specific compounded medications. In paren 3, the rule reads the compounded preparations must not be distributed by an entity other than the drug outlet pharmacy that compounded such veterinary drug preparations. At this time, agency staff do not recommend adopting the FDA guidance as a standard by reference. However, we did want to create a pathway to permit a compounder to supply a small amount of non-patient specific office stock to a veterinarian for emergency situations. Agency staff believe this rule provides a middle ground to permit a 503A pharmacy to compound non-specific patient medications for office stock in limited situations not to exceed a 5-day supply. This would then allow the veterinarian to obtain the remainder necessary for the patient's treatment via a patient-specific prescription. In all other cases, veterinarians should order non-patient specific compounds for dispensing to a patient from a 503B pharmacy. It is permitted to engage in this type of compounding or manufacturing. So in terms of the work group, the majority of the work group members felt like this rule fell outside of their expertise. Additionally, agency staff, again, have some concern that by being more permissive than FDA guidance, they could put outlets in the situation where our rules permit something that the FDA may say is non-compliant should the outlet be inspected by the FDA. Nevertheless, we felt it was important for the board to have this discussion in public and determine if the rule should go to rulemaking or if it should be removed. And that gives that back to you, Board President Doyle.
For President Doyle, thank you. Staff Member Davis for presenting 0730. We'll begin comments, recommendations on this rule with Board Member Patel.
Board Member Patel. Yeah, I do remember a little bit conversation on this one. Again, is the FDA guidance, and this is the whole new section, right? So we didn't have this section before, okay? Yes, there can be a shortage. And to me, it's like, yes, you can only get from 503B, which is we don't have any 503B in the Oregon. That means we are going to promote out of state compounding pharmacy. I mean, do not sit well with me. And again, I don't think so. We should have this whole section here. Let the veterinarian and then compounding pharmacy decide. Why it's only 5 days? What if you have 4 days weekend on Thanksgiving? You can, and it's hard to get the ingredients from compounding pharmacy. It's a long, tedious process sometimes, you know. So I don't think so. We should need this section based on, it's just the FDA guidance.
Member Hennons?
Need to hear what others have.
Member DeBarmore?
DeBarmore, I'm going to hear. There's some sick.
Board Member Hall?
Memorable. So if we don't include this, what is the negative of the 503A pharmacies that we're trying to help? How do you help me out with that?
Staff Member Davis, my understanding is that you had said 503As cannot do this type of compounding at all. And this new rule would allow them to do so for up to a 5-day or 120-hour period. Is that correct?
Correct. And the board, we did send this to rulemaking back when you did like a first look last year, and we got a lot of comments from veterinarians talking about how critical this is to maintain this pathway. And that losing their local pharmacy that could do at least, I mean, there was definite opinions about, is it 3 days, is it 5 days, is it 7 days, like whatever it is, but they didn't want to lose that pathway to be able to treat an animal or have office stock to be able to treat an animal out in the field. Without having to prospectively order for one of these 503Bs out of state. So I encourage you to look back at the rulemaking hearing comments from last July, I believe it was. You got hundreds, I think they're like hundreds of pages from veterinarians asking for this practice to be maintained, and a lot of comment on that, how long you can't, like with the limitation of 120 hours.
Member Hall, so pharmacy gets a prescription for a food producing animal. Want them to have the stock already made, be allowed to have the stock already made, compound made, as opposed to just making it. Can we get the prescription? Then I guess I'm missing something.
Definitely, this is non-patient specific. So this is, I'm a veterinarian and I need to have like 5-day courses of X drug in my kit that I take out to the field to help with horses. Right? This is a non-patient specific prescription that's being compounded. So the pharmacy is compounding, but they're not compounding patient specific, which they're not allowed to do by 503A rules. You have to be a 503B to do non-patient specific.
That makes more sense. That's it.
Member Beeman?
Board Member Beeman. Again, I have concern over basing rules off guidance documents, as I said with the previous rule discussion. However, I appreciate this potential option as a carve out for patient access. I look forward to hearing how this might play out in reality. Specifically pertaining to the 120-hour supply, with knowing now, a year later, now that the new USP standards have been implemented, how that is affecting things with the changes that have been inherent to that. I see this and this carve out that we're having to do that potentially puts our licensees in limbos as one of those unintended consequences I mentioned about the reaction in compounding and how it has affected patient access.
Board Member Doyle, I support the language and would like 503As to be able to supply veterinarians with in-office use or office stock. My recollection of many of the public members who commented on this, they indicated wanting a longer supply. It appears to me that if having a 168-hour supply or 7 days would be potentially more useful for all of the pieces to get into place where said animal owner would be able to then get into pharmacy and get a patient, animal specific prescription filled for them. So I support it with extending the hourly supply. Board Member Chin.
Board Member Chin would also agree with the 7 day supply and with the rule general right now.
Board Member Joyce.
Board Member Joyce, yeah, exactly. I support the language here. There was some strong feedback on this particular topic. Yes, it is more permissive, and I also questioned the 5 day supply as not being enough. Again, it was the feedback was for this language, and it does expand patient access for the veterinary community. Yeah, I support 7 days.
Board Member Hemmings, coming back to you.
Board Member Hemmings, just for, so non-food producing animal, is that like chickens?
An example would be your pet dog as opposed to a cow that would then later be made into hamburger.
Isn't a chicken producing food,
It is.
producing animals, it produces eggs?
That's what it is.
Yeah, for chicken would not be part of this rule. A horse is probably the most common example we got when the rulemaking hearing. But it could be a pet, it can be anything that's not, non-food producing animals are regulated by different regulations, the medications. We can't regulate those, but non-food producing animals, we regulate.
So non-food producing animals doesn't include animals that you may choose to eat, doesn't produce food. If someone chooses to, I mean, people eat animals, so I'm confused.
Food producing animal, not just an animal that produces food, AKA egg or e.g. eggs, but also food producing, meaning cattle, that they themselves turn into the food, for us.
That's not all animals can be.
I,
Okay, so the verbiage here isn't, it says non-food producing animals, so I'm thinking an animal that does not produce food, not that the animal itself isn't itself food. So a cow in and of itself is food, right?
yes,
Chickens is food, but they also produce food. A horse doesn't produce food, but could be food for
Yes.
some people.
yes,
Okay, So is this clarified somewhere? Like, would someone know what that means? Like, what is the definition of a non-food producing animal?
Councilor Tony?
Is there a definition in the,
So, hey, Chief Tony, and I'm gonna also, I think that board member Beaman may have more information than I do. But the FDA regulates what are called food producing animals.
okay,
And so a non-food producing animal is any animal that the FDA doesn't think of as food producing. And you're technically correct, you could eat cockroaches, I mean, and some cultures do.
yes,
I'm not one of them, but people do. But that the FDA has got a definite, the FDA regulates, so we're saying anything that the FDA doesn't handle is what we're talking about.
so board member Hammond, so the understanding here is that anyone who's reading this rule understand that it refers to the FDA's list.
AAG Bertoni, yeah, I believe that this is licensed veterinarians are gonna be savvy to what those regulations look like, at least to know what their scope of authority is.
Board member Hammond, so why are we writing rules for veterinarians when we don't regulate them?
Remember Doyle, we're writing rules about a compounding pharmacy that they can provide drugs for the office use of the veterinarian. We're not talking about how veterinarians practice, but how the drug itself can be manufactured in advance for the veterinarian's use.
Remember Hammond, so if a veterinarian violated this rule, you wouldn't have any recourse because you don't regulate veterinarians.
AAG Bertoni, so are you envisioning the veterinarian would get the drug and then use it on they get a drug for dogs and they use it on chickens? Is that what you're thinking of?
No, for example,
Well,
that's not, we don't regulate that, right?
no, the Oregon Board of Veterinary Medicine regulates veterinarians. They're licensed professionals regulated by Oregon,
Right.
but they are not regulated by this board. But the pharmacy that provides drugs to the veterinarians are regulated by this board because it's the pharmacist who's providing the drugs. If a pharmacist sells me over-the-counter Tylenol and then I misuse it in some way, there's no basis for regulating, the pharmacist hasn't done anything wrong. My point. So here, what you're looking at, the question you're looking at is what can the pharmacist permissibly do? They've got to know who their customer is. And this board would regulate the pharmacist if it sold these types of drugs to me on the street instead of to a non-licensed pharmacist, a non-licensed veterinarian, right? That would be a violation of the board's rules, this board's rules, and this board would regulate it.
Board member Hammond, so if a prescription came in by a patient, and the patient here being the animal, right? I mean, it's a human who's bringing in the prescription, right? You know what I mean? But for veterinarians, if their patient is the animal, right? So the prescription would need to be written based on these rules by okay.
Remember Beeman?
Board member Beaman, so there are, and this is thinking back a while, there are even prescriptions that are veterinary medications that you can give to what would be otherwise considered a food producing animal that then would not be considered a food producing animal, even though it's a cow, but I'm gonna treat that cow with this. That cow can no longer be used for milk or beef production. And so this conversation made me think does this, with the definition we have of food producing or non-producing or what's written here, encompass that if a pharmacy/pharmacist did this in order to treat what would be traditionally food producing, knowing and thus documenting for that veterinarian ordering, or, that any, I guess it would be how that veterinarian could use it since it's for office supply, but there is, I just want to make sure it's clear that if those are used. I think I might just be going down. Well, sorry, I'm trying to think of the way to phrase it, but
So some people have a calendar, never.
Exactly.
Are we going to
Some people,
eat Bessie or use
Exactly.
Bessie's milk? Or
and so
Buster's.
treating that
It might
animal.
be a Buster.
Yeah, and you're not putting it into the food production pathway. And the pharmacy knows that, but still compounds that if it's something
I think
that's.
the vet knows that, the pharmacy doesn't know that. The vet is making the decision whether or not this is a food producing animal. You are filling the prescription based on what the vet is asking for.
That's a.
We don't have to determine as a pharmacist whether this is a pet or whether it's a food producing. Vet,
Because it's not patient specific.
right,
Board member Chin speaking.
but board member
Staff-
Chin,
Staff member Effermoff, do you have a comment?
So for Rafmoff, it seems like there's a way perhaps that we could incorporate if the real issue is just a non-food producing animal as defined by the FDA, or put into context what that definition is so that others would refer back to it and have clarity related to that.
Livestock or something
Yeah.
to that.
chickens, livestock. Just board member Chin.
Board member DeBarmore.
Remember to more, thank you for, allowing me a moment to come back. I went back to comments, that we received, when we originally sent the first run draft out for comment, and the overwhelming comment was, please don't restrict the days. And the reasons were compelling. Antibiotic resistance being one. Patient's animal. The owner's not getting the second part of an antibiotic regimen if it's longer than 5 days. And delays. If they start the first 5 days, but the compounding pharmacies are longer ways away, it's something different. It was. The reasons were found reasons, and the requests weren't unreasonable. I don't know necessarily that 7 days was quite long enough, just from looking, and I think to just access being the primary issue is where does somebody go to finish a course of medicine, and does it make sense to start medicine from this source and get the second part from another source? And I can't answer that because this is not my area of expertise by any means, but that was brought up by more than one person who wrote in the letters. That's the right answer. I don't know that 5 days is the right answer. I don't know 7 days is the right answer. I don't know that we'll have the right answer for every scenario. What is a normal course of antibiotic for a non-food producing animal? Such a thing. Any of you know that? Board member,
Richard?
Brent?
Board member Chin doesn't know that, but I was wondering if we put down that you can put an email on it.
Well,
It's
it's
office stock.
not patient, this is office stock, so it's not patient, it's something that will have. That doesn't.
Okay, so
put a
you're
name on
talking
it.
about, you're talking about the non-patient specific, not the patient
That's
specific.
exact, that's the only thing I'm talking about,
Okay.
is the non-patient specific that the vet has. And likely the patient will take with them to start their course of medicine.
So would it make sense to say like up to 2 weeks?
That was the one that, I mean, that was recommended,
Hmm.
besides nothing,
Hmm.
besides no restriction.
I think, I don't know why, I think that that this board member Chen, if technically you're supposed to be getting this from a 503B or whatever the B ones. We're allowing A's to do this, no? Yeah, I fixed my brain on that one, then, 'cause my compounding pharmacist shaking her head. Explain to me this.
Well, this is board member Beeman, it's not just that you should get it from 503Bs, but there are items that 503Bs cannot manufacture under their rules, that you would have to get from a traditional compounder. So, and so for a patient specific prescription, that's not a problem, but when you need it and need to have it on hand, like you would something from a 503B or from a traditional wholesaler, this 503 restriction on traditional compounding has annihilated that option. So it's not that you should be getting it from somewhere else, it's that you still have the method, you only have the one method to get it. And that method has to be patient specific.
We're trying to figure out how to, this is board member Chin, we're trying to figure out how to put it into rule where our rule does allow for the compounding pharmacy to do this. And so the letters that we got were that we need it in the rule because we absolutely need to have the medicine. Need more than, that's a 5-day supply, that's kind of ridiculous for treating any. Most conditions, I would guess, but going from 0 to 2 weeks seems like at least a start for where because these are going to go to hearing, right? To hear back from our friends about if this is the
Member Doyle, this is not going to rulemaking hearing. We've provided feedback and this package will come back to a future board meeting first for further discussion before it's probably.
so, okay.
Remember Patel?
Board Member Patel, so the reason I don't like the restriction is whether it's a 5 days or 2 weeks. I feel like it's supposed to be up to the veterinarian, like what office staff they use 5 days or 1 week or 2 week, right? Like it's depend on like how many animals you see. So it's like, let's say 5 days supply, but 5 days supply for one animal, sure, it's a 15 tablet, but if you're going to see more the same kind of animal, then you need more office stock, not just that 15 tablet. And the other thing is like sometimes it's hard to make this small quantity as a compounding drug. Like you have to make in bulk, it's unavoidable because it's like super small quantities you have to make. The quantity of ingredient you have to make for that 5, 10 or 15 tablet. So it's like sometimes you can't even make less than 50 tablets or less than 30 tablets. That's the way it is when the calculation come back. So I feel like there's, to me as a compounding pharmacist, someone say like, okay, I need 5 days supply, right? But then I was like, 5 days supply, like what's the quantity? And that should be based on the veterinary, like how many how many animals they see. I don't think so. We should have restriction whether it's a 5 days or 2 weeks. I think you're supposed to say like, hey, I need 100 tablets for office stock. Or 200 tablets for office stock. Based on their patient population or which is animal.
Member Doyle, so I will call the question like similarly. Please indicate when we go around if you want to see it amended. There seems to be.
I just wanted to bring up one thing, and Board Member Barnmore, you can either reinforce what I'm about to say or tell me that I'm wrong, but if I recall correctly I just want to make clear, the board understood, the comments we got from veterinarians were really against this rule because they don't understand the business of pharmacy and the act that restricts 503A and 503B. So they were like, do not limit this. Like the comments were overwhelmingly like, board, please don't limit this. But what they didn't understand is this is actually creating access because pharmacies aren't allowed to do this by the FDA guidance. And we're trying to open a pathway within our state to permit this to happen. Now, whether it ends up as a 5-day supply or a 2-week supply or whatever, this is enabling access. And I just wanted that to potentially go on the record so that, because I'm sure we have veterinarians listening, because this has been, they keep asking for when is this conversation going to happen? Just to be clear, a 503A or traditional pharmacy located here in Oregon can only create patient-specific medications according to the FDA. And this would allow them to do a little bit more by creating some office stock, but it does potentially put them in opposition with the FDA guidance. So we're just trying to create a pathway, but I think on most of their comments, if you read them, they actually say like, please don't adopt this rule. But it was from the perspective of like it seemed that they thought that this could happen currently and that they could just get unlimited quantities of supplies. And why are you restricting it where we're trying to actually create access, not limit access? So, board member.
Remember the bar, Maria, you had.
There's one more word that I just wanted to make sure that came up in many, many, many letters was that it doesn't say that they can dispense. And that is not what's it, that's not our role. The office stock, they choose what to do with the office stock. That has nothing to, we don't control that.
Yeah.
We're just telling pharmacies what they can do. Once it becomes their office stock, their rules apply.
Yeah, we're not requiring the pharmacy to register as a manufacturer to do this.
But the vet
Right.
letters
Yeah.
said, please say we can dispense it.
Yeah.
But that's not our role. That's their vet regulations. So that's out of our scope to change that. So just pick another point to make sure that's on the record.
Member Beeman?
Member Beeman, so in thinking about that, this is a kind of a carve out of the rules for the 503As. Have in other states where that's happened, where there's a discrepancy between the rules and USP, and an FDA inspection happens, how does that process get handled? When the state rules say this, and if you don't know, I just am asking in the future, maybe, like, it always is concerning to put licensees in kind of a limbo area, even though there is a need for it, because of the fear of the FDA. And yes, I mean, can the FDA discipline them? Does it just get reported back to the state and then the board handles it case by case, or do we have any data?
Member Efremov, I think many great questions in that very concise statement there. I think a few things to think about too, related to jurisdiction and the FDA, what the FDA is looking for. They would be looking to standards of manufacturing, right? So when they're going in, if you are not part of the carve out and you're not compounding to 503A, you would have to be 503B or you would be a manufacturer, right? So it depends on different regulations and what they would be assessing via their inspection. There are other states that have some of these carve outs. I believe that's where the language was drafted. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jen, it might have been Ohio or another state that had similar language like this. We're looking to maybe getting more information to see if we can find out if they've ever had these situations. Since we do not have these rules yet in our state, we don't really have any information that can be shared at this time, but appreciate the handedness and understanding to the lines of jurisdiction and the potential risk that each outlet, entity, or facility needs to assess to see how they want to participate in certain functions or not, depending on their registration and the services they provide and what overlapping jurisdiction might be there.
Member Hemmons, did you have a question?
Board Member Hemmons, I had a question about specifically for line 11347. Specifically for a single treatment episode. That vary, I mean, depending on the patient, and what the treatment is, what the diagnosis is. So how can you then put a supply limit on it if you're not, a single treatment could vary, right?
Member Chin, last comment before I call the question.
Last comment. I had previously said that the 10 days to whatever. I'm thinking just take out not to exceed the 120 hour, just leave a period of a single treatment episode and leave that up to the vet. Like we do for the pharmacists and their professional judgment about what their patients need.
Member Doyle, it seems as if the board is in favor for the rule overall, except for the hour or length of supply. So I'm gonna go around the room one last time and ask what length of time, if any, should be in little b, line 1347. Board Member Patel.
Board Member Patel, if we must keep this section, then I would say for in-office use, office stockpile license veterinarian is up to the veterinarian. I wouldn't put like specifically for a single treatment or any day supply.
Member Evans.
Member Hemmings, I think it should be left up to the veterinary's professional judgment.
Member DeBarnwell.
Board Member DeBarmore, understanding it is an allowance that would, under the current language, would be prohibited by regular pharmacy. I would say a single treatment episode, leave it at that, so it's not a reoccurring prescription for.
Member Hall.
Member Hall, I would leave it up to the veterinarian. I feel like if you say single treatment episode, I mean, that's per animal. So confusing. I would just leave it up to the veterinarian.
Member Demon.
For being, I would leave it up to the veterinarian.
Member Doyle, 7 days. Member Chin.
Member Chin, I would take out not to exceed anytime.
Member Joyce.
Foreman Joyce, I support specifically for a single treatment episode and having no restriction on supply. Because it covers a single treatment.
That concludes discussion of drug compounding. To my knowledge, I'm cross-referencing with Staff Member Davis. Yes, okay. We will now move on with policy topics ranking discussion. I believe that's with Executive Director Fox or Staff Member Davis. Staff Member Davis. Good, thank you.
Okay. Hold on just a second while Staff Member Melvin pulls up the documents.
Problem.
Just for a little background for the public, the board members were sent a survey prior to this meeting to help expedite and facilitate this conversation during the board meeting. You've been provided with a copy of the actual survey and each participant's responses. And then as one of the mailings and mailing D as a dog. And then this, if you can, hang on, yeah. This, what is going to be showing on the screen shortly is the compilation of the final averages. So we had 7 of the 8 board members that participated in this optional survey. And you can see here the dates, survey dates were 5/23 to 6/10. So I pulled in one last response that came in yesterday. And I think this is updated since possibly the mailing went out because of that one late response that we have now included. So the respondents were asked to scale and they put them in order. They didn't have a number, but it was like rank at the top you know, what's your highest priority, rank at the bottom, what's your lowest, and then on the back end, the Survey Monkey tool, you know, assigned at the top spot was number 1, number 2. So we took an average of all 7 members that responded. And so the lower the number, the higher the ranking. Because a 1 was top priority for that person, and I think it was 13 was the lowest priority. There were some ties there at the bottom, but there were 13 options. These policy topics were selected, and it shows this on the survey, based on previous board discussion, like during a board meeting where they'd say, board, we'd like to have a policy to support agency staff. Please bring back a discussion on this topic. Or as part of the strategic plan, we have directives to work on the rules. And so we're trying to tease out for the board, like what do you want us to work on first, right? Because we can't be working on all 13 of these concepts. And then, as you know, there are constantly new things that you'll bring up at this meeting to say, agency staff, we'd like you to bring us a topic. And so what our thought process is that we would do this initial ranking, and these are all the things that have kind of been in our bucket for like months. And then as you have new things that you want us to talk about, we're going to ask you to tell us, where does it fall in this priority list? Because we can only do so many things at once. Things you don't see on here, something like compounding, because we've already been working on that and that's fully underway. But these are topics that we haven't brought back, that there's been a discussion or as part of our strategic plan. So based on the responses that we received from board members, I wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe discuss a little further if you feel like when it's all said and done, like, wow, I'm really surprised that ended up where it ended up, or I agree with drug storage being number 1 and clinical pharmacy agreements being number 2, and collaborative drug therapy, applicability pharmacist rules being number 3. And these will be the order for the most part that you see them in. I mean, there's always a legislative session that's going to come in and they're going to have an emergency effective bill. And then we're going to have to put that in and prioritize that higher. But we'll just try to work through these mostly in the order that they have shown up. So like, I wouldn't be bringing you pharmacy rules for Division 41 anytime soon. Our strategic plan is through 2029, so that looks like it's looking like a 2027 to 2029 type discussion based on the fact that it was tied for 12th place. Versus drug storage might be something you might see at August or October board meeting sometime this year. So just trying to prioritize, because we can't do all 13 concepts at once, and you don't want to do that either. I think you're a little rules exhausted as well. So back to you, President Doyle, for board discussion on, are you overall, does this look right? Does anything look wrong? And then we'll move from there.
Board Member Doyle, thank you, staff, for putting this together and reconciling the results. It was new information to me that another response came in recently. I therefore am comparing what the mailing was that I had last looked at versus what's presented on the screen, and I noticed the first 6 topics are the same rank. It's only after the 6th topic that there are some subtle one place changes. So with that framework, we'll ask board members to respond to staff member Davis's direction for input. And we begin with board member Hemmons.
Member Hemmons, when was this done? This year?
That board member, Executive Director Fox, can you remind us of the date? It was, I believe, approximately
June 2024.
2 weeks ago.
We sent it out in May and actually be back by the 10th of June. Was last week, so we can compile it and get it ready for this meeting.
Remember Hemmons, so this was completed by board members who are pharmacists.
I got the email and I did the ranking. It's probably still in your email, dear.
Okay. I'm of the belief that if you don't vote, you can't complain, so I was just curious.
Remember Doyle, on the second page of the document, staff member Davis can enlarge in this. You can actually see the name of the respondent at the bottom. And so there were 6 people that you see responded there. And based on your comments, I'm inferring that the 7th response that just came in recently was from board member Joyce. Yeah.
$8 short.
Board Member Evans, I was just trying to figure out if this was the required non-anonymous survey that we had to do before. But this is
This is
something
different.
different.
This
Okay,
was different.
all right, thank you.
Anonymous.
And board member Hemmons, do you find any concern with this?
I don't know what happened this meeting, so.
Board member DeBarmore?
Board member DeBarmore, so it. I have a lot to say from here on out, but I was surprised. Surprised, not surprised, by some of these came out, yes. Just to my fellow board members, as you go forward, there's a lot of areas in the rules that haven't been touched for many, many, many years. And there's a lot of places where drugs are that have been considered in a long time. And we've spent many years in certain small pockets, and we've written a lot of words about those. And to continue to focus and create more or do more. Let what's there settle in for a little bit. At other areas where drugs are and make sure our drug supply is safe from end to end in the state. It's not just in a outlet. There's a lot of other places where drugs are. We're responsible for all of that.
Board member DeBarmore, do you have an idea of, or any, something that ended up lower on the list that should have been much higher?
Board member DeBarmore, we haven't touched the SCSA. That hasn't even been addressed. We started it like the first year I was on the board. Never gotten prioritized again, never even brought up in discussion. It was gonna be a big deal.
Is it?
Yes, CSA, it's essentially making sure our drug supply is safe from end to end.
Oh, those, that, I've seen lots of slides on that.
We touched it in little ways, but not look at non-drug outlet pharmacy. We haven't in depth, in a way that's meaningful.
Member Hemmings, can I just ask Board Member DeBarmore something? Because I think, I don't know what drug storage means. Would that, would that fall under drug storage, what you just mentioned?
Board member Doyle? Yeah, that would be a piece of it, but the SCSA is a, federal issue that we'll have to comply with in the future, but specifically the definition of each of these topics is outlined in the table on page 2. And so specifically for drug storage, it says this topic will focus on regulations for safe and secure storage of medicines within Oregon by all registrants. And so that's the information that board members had received in terms of that we use for our ranking purposes.
They read it.
But in only 041. So that was what was provided in only 041. So not drugstore, it's outside of a drug outlet. It was only 041.
Yeah, in Division 41.
Don't.
Let me start.
Member Davis, do you have a comment?
Staff Member Davis, at the very top of the survey, it did talk about what DSCSA was and what we needed to do. And then you could see in multiple divisions, wholesalers, manufacturers, like that's part of the rewrite. So it would just be, I mean, it's not that we've forgotten about DSCSA, it'd be just right, but so it would be coming. In terms of drug storage, we were citing the current rule that would be under discussion, like. So right now, that's where your drug storage rule is. That doesn't mean that that conversation would be limited to a pharmacy once we start going back to rewrite, but we're not there yet. And we were just citing the specific rules that so you knew what to look at if you were wanting to look at a rule to go, oh, what's drug storage and what's the current rule about that?
Member Hall?
Member Hall, I don't have any comments specifically, but I just appreciate that, we were able to try to rank our provision, what we want to look at in the future.
Member Beeman?
Member Beeman, I appreciate that we did get to rank them. And I appreciate that this is the view of this board. My only concern is that this board is changing soon. Quite drastically. We have 3 new members coming on shortly. And that's 3 new voices that won't be heard if we just look at this survey. I don't know if we can issue this, I don't know how to approach that, but I do, it's hard because I don't want to lose the voices of the 2 members that we have now, but I also want to capture so that I'm just kind of pose the risk of, are we in one meeting, this may not be the same ranking as it is for this meeting. But I know that can always change meeting to meeting depending on anything. So that's just kind of my thought process is we're gonna have a pretty big shift. And is this really capturing the intent of that board?
Board Member Doyle, speaking to address that. I was involved in designing this, and we thought about the pros and the cons of delivering the survey now or waiting until after the change. I had advocated that it was necessary, serving as your president, to send the survey out now to capture this moment in time, to put a flag in the sand, so to speak, of where to move from here, particularly because we're getting requests from other entities for reviewing certain items. And so it was necessary for the board to understand what are all of the things that board staff have been directed to do by board members already to this point. And we need to have this information before we can make decisions on where we would intertwine other requests. The other issue is, with no disrespect to incoming board members, but it also has been a comment from newer board members, including my experience myself when it came onto the board. I was, use the euphemism, you want deer in headlights, or drinking from fountain, watering hose, fire hose, that the concern is that board staff would not have the traction to start moving forward with these things until which time new board members were settled in and could make some well-informed contributions to this list. Certainly, I think this is going to be a living document for us. That's my opinion. And that things could potentially change as the universe changes around us. But at least board staff and board members have a commonplace understanding of where priorities exist at this time. With regard to my personal comments, my turn to go around the table. I agree with the rankings. I find it interesting among looking at the different board members. I appreciate that transparency to reflect on how I compare to Rachel DeBarmore and vice versa in some places and where we're polar opposites. I think the problem there, I could go into some arguments about the statistical methods with regard to producing this list, but that's not the design of it, so to speak. And I think I advocate for this board and then how the board changes in the next couple of months, that we continue to use this tool as presented today with its hierarchy moving forward, so we can be expeditious in our processes. Board Member Chin.
Remember, Chen is in gratitude for you and your work on getting this and putting a flag in the sand for us. It's your last board meeting, so thank you. For me, being a non-pharmacist, it was interesting trying to rank things, and this was too tiny for me to look at for that I was even have it name down there or what any of that says. So one of these days I'll make this on a bigger piece of paper so I can see it to compare where I am with Rachel tomorrow. But the only thing that I noticed is that there's outsourcing facilities, 503Bs, that I don't see on the original document that I was sent. So there are 13 policy topics. And then on this one, there's 12 on the one that I was sent, that's in our board packet. And there's 13 on this one, and the only one that I don't see on the one in my ad is the outsourcing 503Bs.
Remember Doyle, the ninth row.
Can I address that?
Yes, please.
So when we got that last minute response, thank you. I went back and redid it and realized I had left off one of them. And so I did add that 13. It was on the survey. I just didn't put it on that ranking PowerPoint that we're showing. I failed that. It was down as low as it is. It didn't move around with the additional survey, but I did find that was missing and added it to this. And I just do want to say, because Stefan Belvin's whispered in my ear, when we publish the meeting summary, the updated document with the 7th survey will be included in the meeting summary so that the public will have access to this document as you're viewing it today.
Robert Joyce.
Board Member Joyce, so I'm somewhat disappointed, and so would former Board Member Cindy Bipperman would be disappointed as well, that pharmacy tech education isn't a topic of discussion. I know that we had discussed pharmacy techs and pharmacists in the past agendas, and there was a attrition and job shortage in regards to pharmacy technicians in Oregon. And the board made some changes to make it easier for technicians to renew their licenses, to become a pharmacy technician, et cetera. And we've gained those numbers back. So I think now is the time to look forward, say 2028, 2026, 2028, to possibly look at the CPHT model for pharmacy technicians. So I wish that was on here as a topic, pharmacy tech education. I do think now is the time to kind of raise that bar a little bit, since we've gained back a lot of the pharmacy techs that we had lost around COVID time. Also, another thing I just want to add is in all these topics, we need to implement a DEI plan. I think we do have that kind of going, but we should be a little more official and implement the DEI. Pharmacy tech education for sure needs to be addressed in the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Fox.
Thank you, President Doyle, Board Member Joyce. Just as a response, the pharmacy technician education, as was stated from former Board Member Bipperman and yourself, If you remember, we have that embedded in a strategic plan, that this board adopted. And the DEI plan, is a expectation of the governor that, the agency staff, we have pulled together and we just finalized and submitted, recently. So that's already in the works.
Member Patel?
So, I would echo whatever board member Ramamar said. Yeah, it's not like we only see the drugs in the drug outlets. There are lots of places use the storage drug, like clinics, like those pharma representative, they also have drug samples. They're also storing it. We never talk about it. I don't know when we saw this rule, wholesalers, everything, so. Yeah, we keep writing rule on that small pockets.
Any other board comments after we've all gone around once?
Board Member Evans, I'm just an observation in listening to the board members' comments. So who voted? I mean, how, it sounds like most people don't agree with the ranking, but
Board Member Doyle, I would disagree with that comment. I think that there are some subtleties that maybe in terms of end-to-end product chain and safety have not been fully sort of, as staff member Davis had said, are sort of embedded in each of these, but are not called out by name like DSC, CSA. And overall, I've heard two comments from Board Member DeBarmore and Board Member Patel that some of the lower ranked items like wholesalers should be reviewed first. But again, this was a group dynamic ranking system. And there were 7 board members who voted, and they are identified at the bottom of the table, plus most recently, Board Member Joyce. So that's, the source of the information that 7 board members created their ranking, and it was data averaged to produce this list.
maybe it's just me. I'm getting that energy from the members. I didn't vote, so I'm not getting the energy that says, oh yeah, that looks good because that's what I voted for. Something to me just doesn't seem to connect, but maybe it's just me.
Board
The
member,
energy is very different from, if this is the ranking, that number 1 is drug storage. I'm just
Want to talk about it. They know they need to.
not, yeah, okay.
did I misinterpret Board Member DeBarmore's arms up in the air for drug storage is number 1? Oh, you don't have to be here. Okay, so that's a different yay.
No, I said that he wants to talk about it, but we need to.
This is staff member Davis. I honestly don't know what score, but we pulled it up here. Rachel, if you could put the line, if you could just put the cursor so that people see. So drug storage, I think what we're seeing here, what you're not feeling the energy is, we had some people that were like, this is my number 1. Like, this is important to me and I want this first, but we also had people that ranked it 8th and 7th. So there's a pretty wide variety. So those people might not be feeling something they ranked 1 might have ended up 10th or 11th. So I think, there wasn't any one, like your average score wasn't 1 or 2. Like, there wasn't any one topic that like had a unanimous support. It was a very broad, you could just see the variation of the numbers. Somebody marks at 12 and someone marks at 4. Like, it wasn't consistent between board members.
I don't. This board member Chen, I'm really sure about number 1 on that one for me, mostly because if we spend half a day on discipline day just on one topic, and it is an issue.
As I said, if you don't vote, you can't complain. So I didn't vote, I did observation.
There are comments from board members? Executive Director Fox, you're leaning in?
you, President Doyle. So one of the, thank the board for responding, the feedback here today. What would be great is just to get a consensus of the board, the direction moving forward, that agency staff, we're going to take this and use this living, breathing document. The board members that are coming on in a matter of 30 days or 2 weeks. Those board members will be able to have an opportunity in the near future, whether that be vis-a-vis November, December, when we get more into retreat and some other items that's going to be coming before the board, or whether that be right before the long session in early 25, first quarter 25. So there's opportunities if the board currently right now, those in place in your tenure, if there's changes that you'd like to see, it would be helpful to understand that now. Because we want to be able to take this and then take your adopted strategic plan, which has some of these items as well, and continue in developing our implementation plan. So we can also overlay that with the other directives that we have as a state agency and developing our work plan.
Member Doyle, again, asking for any specific recommendations for re-ranking of any of these items.
Remember Hemmings, so what does this mean? The board moving forward. Right, so does this mean that what we decide, not what was decided here is what becomes the priority for the board for the next years?
So what you decide here, what I would say is, do short-term, long-term. Short-term, with the current board until it changes, this is the direction that this current board by consensus is giving agency staff to say, these are our priorities, and this is within the order of the items that we want you all to continue to work on. Now, this may change long-term, but at least short-term, this gives us more direction on make sure that our internal priorities is aligning with the board's priorities.
Board Member Doyle, and as you may recall, Staff Member Davis saying there was some topic lower down on the list that is probably going to be in the last 2 years of our 5-year plan, just based on its ranking. I would also imagine that for 10s and 12s, because there's ties and there's not a significant difference between a 9 or a 9.14. By the time we would get to those in 2+ years, probably some re-ranking like this with the current board would be taken at that time for further elucidation of what actually are the most important topics at that time.
Board Member Hemmings, I'm asking because I think if I remember correctly, there was some discussion that the prior priorities that was set by the board, hindsight's 2020, but created a lot of issues around the public's view of the board. And that's why I'm concerned about making these decisions now with the changes that will be forthcoming in the board membership.
But Board Member Doyle, I have already explained my advocacy for doing this now and the reasons behind that. Again, this is my opinion, and I've also heard it from Executive Director Fox, that this is going to be a living document, and at which time the future board constituents find it necessary to do a re-ranking to provide guidance to board staff, then that will be taken at such time. But I felt that it was necessary to do this now, particularly because of the change that was coming, and board staff would be essentially at risk of spinning their wheels, not knowing what to do for a period of months before new board members got their feet wet and were able to move forward. So I'll call the question, or I'm not hearing any board members asking for something to be re-ranked on this list.
I do have a comment. This is Board Member Joyce. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that safe pharmacy practice conditions wasn't ranked a little higher, being that there's PIC shortages, staffing shortages, financial impact of PBMs on pharmacies, independent pharmacies. I mean, that all is tied into that topic. So, I mean, CDTM is also important to me, but I thought that would be higher up on this ranking. Because when we talk about safe practice conditions, you know, we had surveys go out to address SPPC, and you know, everyone is stressed out over staffing, not having a pick on hand, not being able to stay open, and also financial ramifications of the current healthcare practice, you know, with PBMs and payments and things like that. So I just thought that would be higher.
Member Patel?
But yeah, I agree, and I hear both side of comment, but I also see that if 3 new board members are coming, I feel like, yeah, it's not like everyone is going to drink from fire hose, right? Some board members may be well dehydrated before they come to board, so yeah, it's going to be interesting, and I wish like we can survey again when all the 3 board members come on board. Just the thought.
This is Board Member Jen. Nobody comes onto this board well hydrated. This is complex board and complex rules. Even people who have sat in the audience for 7 years and have seen all this rule writing. They're also multitasking back there. They're not doing the work that we're doing. They are in and out observing, making sure that the things that are important to them in their jobs while they sit in those seats are being done. It's different doing this work. It's important to have, as I think Board President Doyle said, just a flag in the sand of where are we right now, so that we know where we're going to move when we do have 3 new board members on this board. Always a changing situation. This is a very different situation to have 2 people lead for this board. Knowing where we are now, and then 6 months or 5 months or whenever, and as it's been stated by our executive director and our board president, that this is not a be all and end all. This is the start of a process for us to be able to keep working on a process and to see, okay, this is where we were this point. In 5, 6 months, where are we again? We're going to do this again. And we can say, whoa, things have really changed. How we know how we got to where we are now. It's going to be interesting to see where we're going to be with 3 new board members. So I think this is of huge value to me.
Joyce, do you advocate that safe pharmacy practice be ranked to a different number than 4?
2 or 3.
2 or 3? Please state which one you would like. I'm Board Member Joy. I'm trying to follow modified Robert's Rules of Order, so I'm looking for edits, and I need specific recommendations for edits to this list. If and when you say 2 or 3, then I'll ask the board if they agree with that. And then we would approve that edit, and then we would look to approving the document as a whole.
Roger. I would say number 2.
Board member Hemmings, do you agree with replacing SPPC into slot number 2 and then everything else move down one item?
Board member Hemmings, I don't have an opinion on that specific question.
Member DeBarmore,
Board Member DeBarmore, no.
member Hall,
No.
member Beeman,
Board member Beeman, no.
member Doyle, no. Board member Chin.
No.
Member Joyce. Member Joyce, yes. Everybody gets to vote. Board member Patel,
But Patel,
member Doyle, the edit or the amendment failed. Are there any other amendments that board members would like to make to this ranking list? Hearing and seeing none, is there a motion to approve the policy topics priority ranking as presented?
Remember Chin so moves.
For a second,
Board member Hall.
we have a motion from board member Chin, second by Hall. Now call roll vote to approve the policy topics priority ranking as presented, number 1 through 12. Or 13 including ties. Board President Doyle, yes. Board Vice President Chin,
Yes.
member Beeman, member DeBarmore,
Abstain.
member Hall,
Yes.
member Hemmons,
Abstain.
member Joyce,
No.
member Patel.
Patel abstain.
Council Bertoni, we have 4 yeses, 3 abstains, and 1 opposed. Therefore, my understanding is that the abstentions do not count, and that our denominator would be 5, and we have 4 yeses out of 5 votes.
So ADG Bertoni, for this board, which is a 9-member board, I know you have a vacancy, you had 5 votes. And 3 were necessary to carry a motion, you had 4, so the motion passes.
Thank you. Motion passes. At this time, is it okay with staff if we take our break just a little bit early? We'll take our break now from 2:35 until 2:50. We have some board members who had planned to leave early today. Please inform Executive Director Fox and myself at the break whether you're going to be leaving now or actually waiting till the time that you were planning to leave, for example, 3:30. Thank you. We're on break.